Communion controversy. Catholic bishops weigh the message they want to send to pro-abortion politicians. Papal trip to Iraq. We take a look back at the apostolic journey and the Holy Father's message to Christians overseas. Faith and politics. One lawmaker describes the importance of Mother Angelica in his own life story. And the year of St. Joseph. How Catholics are showing devotion to Jesus' foster father. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, July 5th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining us for our Independence Day special. I'm Tracy Sable. During the next half hour, we want to bring you some of our top stories of the year. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops voted in June to move forward on a much anticipated draft of a teaching document on the Eucharist.
Majority of members present and voting is needed. The action passed with a vote of 168 in favor, 55 opposed, 6 abstentions.
The U.S. Bishops' Doctrine Committee will now lead the initiative on the meaning of the Eucharist in the life of the Church. A draft could be ready for debate, amendment, and vote at the bishops' next meeting in November in Baltimore. The first vote took place after extensive and spirited debate over the previous days and weeks. President Joe Biden was asked about the USCCB debate and how it could prevent pro-abortion politicians like him from receiving Holy Communion. Here was his response.
That's a private matter, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Days later, Press Secretary Jen Psaki was also asked for White House reaction. She said the president's faith is personal, and it's something that has helped guide him through some challenging moments in his life.
Well, Joe Biden is a strong man of faith, and as he noted just a couple of days ago, it's personal. He goes to church, as you know, nearly every weekend. He even went when we were on our overseas trip. But it's personal to him. He doesn't see it through a political prism, and we're not going to comment otherwise on the inner workings of the Catholic Church.
We also asked Bishop Andrew Cozzens, the auxiliary bishop of the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis, for his reaction to the teaching document on the Eucharist. It needed a simple majority to pass and reached nearly 75%. He told EWTN News Nightly it was a great result, and it shows there is strong support among the bishops.
I think it ties into the other thing that we are to talk about, which is the need for a Eucharistic revival on all levels. So I was very glad of that. You'll note that even to pass the document, we would need a 2/3 vote in November. So it shows that after a spirited debate, the majority of bishops support this initiative.
Well, after the vote results were announced, more than 50 Catholic Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives, they released a statement asking the bishops not to, quote, weaponize the Eucharist. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
You know, I would say that this is really a pastoral matter for the bishops. And the bishops are going to produce a teaching document that then becomes helpful guidance for every bishop who deals with these pastoral questions. And we're approaching this really as pastors who want to help people get to heaven. That's our main goal. And so we're going to teach about the importance of the Eucharist for getting people to heaven.
I want to talk about now the presentation that you made about a, quote, Eucharistic revival project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm super excited at the fact that the bishops are extremely supportive of a national Eucharistic revival. This is going to be a 3-year project that we hope touches the church at every level, really the diocesan level, the parish level, and even the national level. We hope in the summer of 2024 to have a national Eucharistic Congress like we used to have in this country, where we have 100,000 or more people gathered together to be able to celebrate the gift of Christ in the Eucharist. And this really, I think, is supported so strongly by the bishops because they see that at every level of the church we need a renewal, a revival of our faith in the Eucharist, in the transforming power of the Eucharist. And so it's so encouraging to see that all the bishops really are behind this. Some of them are going to begin already this year. The official revival will begin in the summer of 2022, Corpus Christi 2022, when we'll kick off a national campaign, which we hope will affect the church at every level in the United States, culminating in this national event in 2024.
Yeah, and tell us why this is so important and now.
Well, there's so many reasons why this is so important. You know, the first is this idea came about for a Eucharistic revival before the 2020 elections and even before COVID. Bishop Robert Barron had proposed this idea as early as January of 2020, following the disturbing results that the bishops saw in 2019 about the Pew research, which showed that around 30% of Catholics believe in Jesus' real presence in the Eucharist. Bishops were caught very discouraged by those numbers, and we knew we needed to do something as a church. And so we proposed this idea. And then, of course, the COVID crisis hit, where we had the tragedy of not being able to celebrate the Eucharist together for some months, where, in fact, we've had a lot of people not be able to go to church for a long time. And the bishops recognize we need a revival. And so it was those things, but then also the real positive truth that the Eucharist is such a profound gift. It contains everything that Christ is, his passion, death, and resurrection, his gift of himself to us. It's such a profound gift that we need as a church every now and then to focus on it together and revive our faith in the Eucharist. If we don't do this, we lose this sense of the importance and the centrality that the Eucharist is the source and summit of our life. So I think the bishops see both the negative reasons and the positive reasons for that we need to do this now.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I let you go, Your Excellency, what else took place at the spring meetings that our audience should know about, and other initiatives that you're most excited about?
Well, you know, one of the beautiful things that often passes by is we approved requests for 2 new saints for the church, right? For the Church of the United States, we approved these things at the USCCB. That's a beautiful thing. I was also very excited about the pastoral plan for marriage and family, which was approved by the Committee of Laity, Marriage, Family, and Life, which really attempts to strengthen on a universal level in our country the ministry to marriage and families, which is so important, as we all know, and really in a state of crisis.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate it. God bless you. Bishop Andrew Cozzens, Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis. Thank you again. And as you heard, dozens of Democratic lawmakers accuse the bishops of, quote, weaponizing the Eucharist. But Father Thomas Petri, the president of the Pontifical Faculty of the Immaculate Conception at the Dominican House of Studies, defends the bishops.
Whenever we engage in behaviors or actions that are contrary to the Eucharist, the Church not only has a right, but also has an obligation to challenge and correct us. For our salvation, sure, yes, but also for the good of the Church, for the faithful. And so that's true whether or not you're a politician working on Capitol Hill or in the White House, or whether it's true if you're simply Mrs. McGillicuddy living in the sitting in the back pew of a local country parish who says something publicly on television or in the newspaper that is contradictory to Catholic teaching, to Catholic morals, and Catholic faith. It's not a weapon to be corrected.
Yeah, and
I mean it's a sort of a deflection of not wanting to be corrected, to say, well, you're beating me up or you're using this as a weapon against me. Well, I'm sorry. If you're in the wrong and you're practicing and you're doing immoral things, you're going to be corrected. That's the gospel. That's the church. That's Christianity.
Yeah, another thing I want to talk about, as you heard, here's some people, including political figures, are really challenging the bishops and demanding to be able to receive the Eucharist despite beliefs that go against church teaching. I want to talk more about that. And, can a person actually demand to receive the Eucharist or any sacrament?
Well, on the one hand, the Church does say that the faithful have a right to the sacraments. But on the other hand, we don't have an absolute right, especially if we are living in sin.
And Father Petri also praised the bishops for their effort to revive the Eucharist and highlight its importance. And we were also excited to cover the Pope's trip to Iraq this year. The Holy Father told Iraqi Christians that he can see firsthand that the church in Iraq is alive and that Christ is at work. He encouraged them to work together for a future of peace and prosperity that leaves no one behind. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn brings us the highlights.
On Saturday, Pope Francis traveled to southern Iraq, arriving in Najaf to visit the Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, the most influential Shia Muslim leader who spiritually guides more than 60% of the Iraqi Muslims. During the 45-minute meeting, al-Sistani told Pope Francis that he believes Christians should be able to live in peace in Iraq and enjoy the same rights as all citizens. In response, Pope Francis thanked him for raising his voice in defense of the weakest and the most persecuted. In honor of this historic meeting, the Prime Minister of Iraq announced that March 6th will become a national day of tolerance and coexistence in the country. Pope Francis then travelled to the plain of Ur, which is considered the birthplace of Abraham, to meet with representatives of Christianity, Judaism and Islam. There, the Holy Father said, "This blessed place brings us back to our origins, to the sources of God's work, to the birth of our religions. We seem to have returned home." On Sunday, Pope Francis travelled by helicopter to the city of Mosul, where ISIS first took root and brought the city to its knees during the war. He prayed to the Lord, saying, "Teach us to realise that you have entrusted to us your plan of love, peace and reconciliation." After Mosul, he flew to Karakosh, where he visited the largest Catholic community in Iraq, the Immaculate Conception. The Pope applauded the strength of the Christian community and invited them to trust in God's plan for peace. He said, "The road to a full recovery may still be long, but I ask you, please, not to grow discouraged. What is needed is the ability to forgive, but also the courage not to give up. You are not alone. The Church is with you." Concluding his trip, the Holy Father celebrated Mass with an estimated 18,000 people in Erbil's soccer stadium, where he joined in their love and excitement. He said he came to Iraq to recognize and thank the Christians for their witness of faith. In Rome, Colm Flynn, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, refugee camp. A look at the evolving plans to allow more persecuted people into the United States. And faith and politics, how one lawmaker's Catholic values inspire his desire to protect unborn babies. Welcome back to our Independence Day special featuring some of our top stories of the year. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops applauds the Biden administration's decision to allow more refugees into the United States. It raised the refugee cap from 15,000 to 62,500. The bishops call it a step in the right direction to help those who need it most. But White House correspondent Owen Jensen says the bishops would like to see that number even higher.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki discussing the administration's new refugee cap numbers, just raised after receiving harsh criticism.
He wanted to eliminate any lingering doubt from any refugee across the world that the United States wasn't a country that would welcome refugees in to apply.
For fiscal year 2022, which starts in October, the aim is even higher. 125,000 refugees from places like Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration said that number is, quote, a figure more consistent with our values and capabilities as a nation. The committee also wrote, we are in the midst of the greatest forced displacement crisis of our lifetime and know that there are more than 26 million refugees worldwide and more than 47 million people who are internally displaced. It is imperative that we act now to ensure the safety of these individuals and their families.
This is not just a federal government or U.S. government effort. There are so many organizations who play incredible roles.
But the administration also admitted it will not meet the new 62,500 cap by September, blaming the pandemic in part. Meanwhile,
today, 2 months until July 4th,
on the COVID-19 front, July 4th, mark it down. That's when President Biden wants 70% of U.S. adults to have at least one shot. And he wants kids ages 12 to 15 to get vaccinated, too, in time for school this fall.
So my hope is that if the vaccine is authorized, parents will take advantage of it and get their kids vaccinated.
And that was Owen Jensen reporting for us. Having faith in God is how Representative Jake LaTurner says he lives his life. The sixth-generation Kansan says it is a virtue he learned early on in life with the help of his grandmother as well as EWTN's foundress, Mother Angelica. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales interviewed the congressman for our Faith in Politics series.
This night was going to challenge you to be greater, to be more holy.
It was those lessons from Mother Angelica that still resonate in the mind and heart of Congressman Jake LaTurner.
It was on the entire time I was growing up. Yeah, my grandmother watched Mother Angelica every morning of her life and watches daily mass every day still.
Congressman Jake LaTurner says his grandparents, Joe and Ruby, made sure he stayed true to his Catholic faith. Ironically, he says they both grew up not knowing God.
My grandpa was in the Korean War, and while in Korea, lost sight in his left eye. As a result of that, he was shipped to a hospital, Army hospital in Texas.
While healing, his grandfather would help others around the hospital. One day, Joe helped a fellow soldier to Sunday Mass, which changed his life forever.
Fast forward, my grandmother and him get married. They'd been married for a couple of years, and as he put it, something was missing in our life. And it was that experience that led them to the Catholic Church.
A Catholic faith Congressman LaTurner now instills in his family, a faith that believes in protecting the unborn.
Life issues are what brought me into politics. I grew up standing on life chains. My family is very involved in helping candidates who are pro-life win. And I don't think there has been a time since Roe v. Wade where people should be more optimistic than right now.
He prays the U.S. Supreme Court will bring change if and when it is presented with a case involving abortion. Congressman LaTurner says he keeps his spiritual glass full with the help of daily prayer, and he says the only way his life as a congressman works here on Capitol Hill is with the help of his wife, who he calls a superhero, and as long as they keep Christ as the center of their lives. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, story of revival, the massive effort to repair a historic church in the heart of Rome. And devotion to St. Joseph, how Catholic communities around the country are calling on his guidance and intercession. Welcome back to our Independence Day special featuring some of our top stories of the year. 5 years ago, Pope Francis signed his apostolic exhortation on the family, Amoris Laetitia. To commemorate, the Holy Father announced a special year of the family and dedicated this year to St. Joseph. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn takes us to a church in Rome that celebrated more than just St. Joseph's feast day.
The Church of St. Joseph the Carpenter overlooks Rome's ancient city centre, known as the Roman Forum. The original church was built on a prison where it is believed Saints Peter and Paul were both imprisoned. In August of 2018, 2/3 of the roof collapsed, dragging along with it the gilded wooden ceiling and damaging the marble floors. The church was closed at the time and thankfully no one got hurt. The director of the restoration work, Alessandro Bazzetti, says it was like witnessing the aftermath of an earthquake.
Era veramente un disastro.
Bazzetti says the roof collapsed in an extraordinary way, where many of the architectural frames from the ceiling were intact. But while removing the rubble, the real miracle happened. The face of the Madonna that was carved on the ceiling was found face down on one of the pews. Upon removing a piece of the rubble, they found baby Jesus on the ground, gazing up at his mother, the Virgin Mary.
C'è stata una selezione di tutti gli elementi del cassettonato che venivano puliti in quest'aula.
Bazzetti says the sacred objects were put in the hands of restoration experts and art historians, while architects started to rebuild the roof, decorative ceilings, marble floors, and interior facades. 95% of the statues were restored, and 60% of the architecture was reused. And exactly 1 year after the collapse, they blessed the new roof. And today, on the Feast of St. Joseph, it inaugurates the newly restored church in the heart of Rome. In Rome, Colm Flynn, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the Holy Father's declaration that this would be the year of St. Joseph's comes 150 years after Pope Pius IX declared St. Joseph the patron of the Universal Church. Correspondent Mark Irons shows us the growing devotion to Joseph.
To you, O blessed Joseph, we consecrate our Diocese of St. Petersburg.
From Florida to California, Catholic communities around the country are calling on the guidance and intercession of St. Joseph.
And so it's so important that we turn to him because he wants to help us.
This past weekend on the Feast of St. Joseph the Worker, the Diocese of St. Petersburg, Florida consecrated parishes, schools, ministries, and the people of the diocese to St. Joseph. Father Ralph D'Elia says you can place trust in the earthly father of Jesus.
He wants to help us in the same way our family does, in the same way our friends do. And so when we turn to him and we seek his intercession, he leads us to Christ.
Last December, on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, Pope Francis officially announced the following 365 days would make up a year of St. Joseph. In an apostolic letter, he wrote, "Each of us can discover in Joseph the man who goes unnoticed, a daily, discreet, and hidden presence, an intercessor, a support, and a guide in times of trouble."
A lot of amazing witness he gives to Christ, to following Christ.
Daniel Campbell teaches at St. John Vianney Theological Seminary in Denver. He says the difficult decisions Joseph made in Scripture, leading Mary and Jesus, show complete trust in God and provide proof of a strong prayer life.
So you don't ever actually read of him sitting down to pray, but it's the inference you can make that the only way you could respond with such absolute simple trust and absolute simple humility is if you are constantly keeping the presence of God and constantly in conversation with him.
In honor of this special year, Campbell will teach an online summer class focused on St. Joseph. It's open to people around the world.
Bottom line, I just hope people love St. Joseph and really take him as a patron.
And many Catholics, including student members of the Knights of Columbus at the University of Notre Dame, are entrusting themselves to St. Joseph's care this year by making a 33-day consecration. It involves short readings and prayers.
He's like the epitome of a strong Catholic man.
12 months prior to Pope Francis declaring this a year of St. Joseph, the Diocese of Charlotte had announced its own special year in honor of the foster father of Jesus. We asked Monsignor Patrick Winslow, the Vicar General and Chancellor of the Diocese, about the impact of the saint's intercession.
I think that the fruits that we experience are growth. We've been experiencing a tremendous amount of growth since the founding of our diocese.
What would you say to other dioceses that are considering consecrating themselves to St. Joseph?
Well, I would say that he's a good friend in heaven to have on your side. Certainly he is for the Universal Church, but invoking him on a local level will always be to your benefit.
Since becoming prior of the Dominican House of Studies in Washington, D.C. 4 years ago, Father Aquinas Gilbo says his devotion to St. Joseph has increased.
And having to run a community and a religious community, one focused on the Lord, also a community dedicated to Our Lady. My thoughts just went naturally to St. Joseph, like, how do I do this? You know.
Father Gilbo prays each morning in a small chapel dedicated to Joseph. He says we can rely on the saint just as Christ did as a child in Joseph's care.
He himself goes to Joseph. He places his infant self, under Joseph's protection.
Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching our Independence Day special today. We hope you enjoyed our look back at some of the top stories of the year. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.